Bayo was the man everyone envied. The golden boy. Tall, polished, charismatic. He was the kind of man who didn't need to introduce himself in a room. People already knew who he was. Head of finance at a prominent real estate firm in Lagos, with a corner office, sleek car, international conferences, and a six-figure salary. He was respected, feared, admired. His wife Adora was no less impressive. A senior marketing manager at a rising tech startup, she was sharp, elegant, and known for her brutal efficiency at work and her softness at home. Together, they made an enviable pair. They had matching Lexus SUVs, a duplex in Lacy Face, a nanny for their two kids, and a housekeeper who came twice a week. From the outside, it was a dream. On the inside, still a dream, until the morning it shattered. It was a Friday when it happened, one of those scorching Lagos Fridays, when the sun pressed down like punishment, and the air hung heavy with heat, dust, and quiet tension and urgency. Bayo remembered because the sky was cloudless. The roads unusually clear, and he had finally worn his new tailored navy suit, the one he had been saving for a client presentation that had been postponed twice. He had woken up early, as always, before the rest of the house. The hum of the air conditioner filled the master bedroom as he stood before the mirror adjusting his tie, his mind already deep in numbers and projections. Adora was still asleep, her arm draped across the pillow, her hair spilling over her face in that way he loved. He leaned in, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered, "See you later, baby." He drove to work with the radio low and the AC high, sipping from a travel mug Adora had packed with his favorite ginger tea. At 8:15 a.m., he stepped into the high-rise building in Victoria Island, where he had built his career from scratch. 11 years of hard work, late night, boardroom battles, and an unshakable reputation. Bayo was more than just the head of finance. He was the man management turned to when targets were missed, when investors asked hard questions, when fraud whispers circled. So when he was summoned to the boardroom unexpectedly, he did not think much of it. Maybe a sudden audit, maybe the CEO wanted input on the new budget structure. He walked in, confident and calm, holding a leather-bound notebook and a pen Adora bought him last Christmas. But the moment he stepped into the room, he felt it. Something was off. The smiles were stiff. The HR director, a woman who normally greeted him with small jokes and soft giggles, would not meet his eye. The MD, Chief Adekule, sat with his folded arms and a face that gave nothing away. He barely had time to sit before the MD cleared his throat. "Bayo, we appreciate everything you have done for this company." "Truly we do," he began, and Bayo's stomach turned. That sentence, that tone, he had used it himself once, when letting go of a junior accountant who had miscalculated payroll. "We have had to make some very difficult decisions regarding the future of the firm," the MD continued, voice low, rehearsed. "Effective immediately, your position has been made redundant." The silence that followed was loud. Bayo blinked just once. His hands gripped the arms of the chair. I don't understand," he said, his voice steady despite the storm gathering in his chest. "Redundant? After everything I have done? You're not even offering me a new role?" The HR director slid a brown envelope across the polished mahogany table. "Your severance package is outlined here. We have ensured it's generous." Bayo did not touch it. He just stared at it, like if he ignored it long enough, it would vanish. "This isn't personal," someone else muttered. "It's the economy, the shareholders." But Bayo had stopped listening. In that moment, all the late nights, the weekends missed with his kids, the milestones sacrificed in the name of corporate loyalty, all of it collapsed like a sandcastle under high tide. He rose slowly, collected his notebook, nodded like a man in a dream, and walked out. Down in the parking lot, he sat in his car for what felt like an hour, staring at the dashboard. The envelope lay beside him on the passenger seat, like a silent insult. He did not call Adora. He couldn't. What would he even say? That the man, the provider, the rock, the star had just been cut loose without warning? That the financial empire they had built together might be standing on sand? No, he could not say that. Not yet. So he did the only thing he could. He started the car, drove around Lekki aimlessly, parked at a quiet street off Admiralty Road, and sat there, sweating in his expensive suit, as life, or at least the version he knew, unraveled around him. That evening, he got home just before sunset, the golden light slipping through the living room curtains. As he stepped through the door, he put on the version of himself his family expected. Shoulders straight, voice calm, smile intact. He greeted Adora with a kiss on the cheek, lingering just a second longer than usual. She barely noticed. She was stirring a pot on the stove while helping their youngest with her homework, effortlessly juggling motherhood and dinner. Long day? She asked, not looking up. Yeah, Bayo replied, forcing a chuckle. You know how Fridays are. Then he bent down to lift their 5-year-old son, who ran into his arms with squeals of delight. Their daughter joined in, wrapping her arms around his waist. He laughed, a sound too practiced to be real, and held them both, burying his face in their hair, trying to remember what peace felt like. They all sat at the dining table like they always did, a family of 4, passing bowls of rice, fried plantain, and grilled fish. Adora told a story about her annoying new intern, and the kids giggled between mouthfuls of food. Bayo nodded at the right parts, laughed at the punchlines, asked questions, all like a man whose world had not collapsed just hours before. After the kids were tucked in and the plates washed, and the house had settled into the quiet hum of nighttime, Bayo climbed into bedside with his wife. She was already scrolling through her phone, her face lit by the bluish glow of the screen. He turned to her, watched her silently for a few seconds, the curve of her jaw, the soft crease between her brows as she read something intensely. She looked so normal, so untouched by the truth that now lived inside his chest like a ticking clock. You okay? She asked, sensing his gaze. Yeah, he whispered. Just tired. And she reached out, placed her hand on his chest, and murmured, Same here. Then turned back to her screen, her fingers dancing lightly across it. Bayo stared up at the ceiling for a long time after she fell asleep, listening to her breathing, trying not to let the tears spill. He wanted to tell her, but he could not bring himself to say the words. So he did what he had learned to do best. He buried it. And in the dark, with his wife curled beside him and his world quietly burning beneath the surface, Bayo made a decision. Tomorrow morning, he'd put on his suit again and pretend. The next morning, Bayo woke up at 5:30 a.m. as usual. He shaved, ironed his shirt, sprayed his signature cologne, kissed Adora and the kids, picked up his briefcase, and left. But instead of driving to the office, he parked outside an eatery along the highway. He stayed there for hours, refreshing job boards, editing his CV, and calculating how long their savings could last. By noon, he drove to the public library, sat in a corner, stared at nothing, and drank water. At 4:30 p.m., he stopped by the supermarket, bought some fruits and bread to keep up the illusion, and then went home. Adora was feeding the kids when he returned. He kissed her on the cheek as usual and told her he was exhausted. She smiled, not suspecting a thing. At least not yet. Weeks passed. He told himself he'd tell her. That night, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But every morning, he repeated the ritual. Suit, perfume, goodbye kiss. And every evening, he brought back random things. Ground nuts, milk, eggs, snacks for the kids, and flowers. As if this would make the lie more believable. Yet Adora, perceptive as ever, noticed things. His hands no longer carried the tension of corporate work. His phone never rang anymore. The spark in his eyes was dimming. Then came the Tuesday she returned a day early from a work retreat. It was just afternoon when she stepped into the house. Surprised by the silence, the nanny had taken their young child to the park. Bayo's laptop sat on the coffee table, shut and cold. His work phone, the one that never left his side, even on the weekends, was lying face down on the dresser, untouched. And his shoes, the brown leather pair he always wore on Fridays, they were still at the door. Something was not right. She dialed his number, switched off. But she called his name once, twice, nothing. Bayo was nowhere. Her stomach twisted. She stood there for a long moment, one hand on the edge of the dining chair, the other wrapped around her waist like she was holding herself together. Then she grabbed her khakis, slid her feet into sandals, and walked away briskly to her vehicle. No makeup, no handbag, no plan. Just a rising storm in her chest. The drive from their home to Bayo's office was barely 20 minutes, but it felt longer. Every traffic light, every slowly moving car grated on her nerves. Her fingers tapped against the steering wheel, her thoughts spiraling. Maybe he forgot his phone. Maybe there's an off-site meeting. Maybe... No, this does not add up. She pulled into the familiar driveway of the high-rise where Bayo had worked for years. The same building she had visited before to drop off forgotten documents or bring him lunch on special days. The security man at the gate recognized her and offered her a quick salute. "Madam, good afternoon." "Good afternoon," she replied tightly. "I'm here to see Bayo." The guard hesitated. "Ah, madam, Bayo isn't here." She frowned. "He stepped out?" "No, madam, he doesn't work here anymore." Adora stared at the man, unblinking. "What do you mean?" "Ah, I thought you knew. He stopped working here some time ago, almost 2 months." The world around her blurred. She did not respond, did not argue, just nodded slowly, like her body had registered the information before her brain could make sense of it. She reversed out of the lot, calmly, drove back onto the road and headed home. But inside her chest, her heart pounded with a mix of betrayal, confusion, and fear. He had lost his job, and he had not told her. For almost 2 months, her husband had been waking up every morning, dressing up, kissing her goodbye, and walking into a lie. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking back the sting behind her eyes. "Why, Bayo? Why didn't you just tell me?" By the time she pulled into her driveway, her hands were trembling. She left the engine running, sat in silence, and waited. Waited for her husband to come home from the job he no longer had. When Bayo returned that evening, holding a plastic bag with apples and a sachet of milk, he froze when he saw her on the couch. Fully dressed, her car keys in her hand. Her voice was calm, too calm. I went to your office today. Bayo's body went cold. They said you left 2 months ago. He did not speak. He could not. She stood, walked towards him, and looked into his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? And just like that, the dam broke. Bayo dropped the bag, dropped to his knees, and wept. For the shame, the lies, the fear, the days spent pretending. The weight of being a man in a world where failure meant invisibility. I was scared, he sobbed. I thought you'd leave me, that I'd disappoint you, that you'd only loved the man in the suit. Adora knelt before him, cupped his face, and shook her head slowly. I married the man, Bayo, not the money, not the position. You who held me when I broke down after my miscarriage. You who stayed up feeding our daughter when I was sick. You who never once made me feel small. You are my husband. He stared at her, trembling. She pulled him into her arms, held him as tightly as she could, and whispered, You don't have to hide your pain from me. I am not your boss. I'm your partner. That night, for the first time in weeks, Bayo slept peacefully. Weight lifted off his shoulders. The next morning, he did not wear a suit. Instead, he wore a polo shirt, made breakfast for the kids, and saw Adora off at the door. As she was leaving, she kissed him and smiled. We'll get through this. You don't have to be strong alone. He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. And this time, when she drove off, he did not pretend. He stayed home, updated his CV honestly, reached out to a few connections, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe again. Not because things were fixed, but because he was not pretending anymore. In the weeks that followed Bayo's confession, Adora stepped into a kind of quiet power, not with grand speeches or dramatic sacrifices, but with the steady grace of a woman who understood what it meant to hold her family together in a storm. She did not shame him. She did not lecture. She didn't bring up the lie in anger. Instead, she became his anchor. Some mornings she woke up early, got the kids ready for school, and packed Bayo's tea just like she used to. Not out of habit, but out of love. She picked up more responsibilities at work, volunteering for extra campaigns and late meetings, finding ways to increase her income without making a show for it. When her paycheck came, she split it carefully between school fees, groceries, and savings, without ever making Bayo feel like less of a man. At home, she never let the air grow heavy. She made space for laughter, for normalcy, for small joys, like Saturday movies together and Sunday jollof rice in the backyard. And in private, she held Bayo's fears when he could not hold them himself. When creditors called, she handled them. When relatives hinted about financial help, she covered for both of them. Always with a smile, always with dignity. She carried the family, not just financially, but emotionally. She reminded Bayo, in 100 subtle ways, that his worth was never tied to his wallet, that he was still the man she loved, respected, and chose. And in doing so, she gave him something far greater than charity or pity. She gave him time to breathe, time to heal, time to find his footing again, not as a provider, but as a man rediscovering who he was beyond the title. Because while Bayo had lost his job, he had not lost his home. And that was because Adora never let it fall. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is fall and trust that love will catch him.